This might be my new favorite travel gimbal for when you just need a little bit smoother footage than you can get handheld with a camera. This thing does a really good job. Hey, my name is Jake and I create content here to help solo creators on the go. Today we're talking about the Crane M3, a super compact, small, lightweight travel gimbal from Zhiyun. Has a lot of things going for it and a couple of things that need to be addressed or fixed, but let's talk about it. Full disclosure, Zhiyun did send this gimbal to me, but they're not paying for this review. They don't get any input on this video and they don't get to see it before this video is released. So these are my opinions about this gimbal after working with it for the last few weeks. There's a lot to like about this gimbal, and one of my favorite things is how small and lightweight it is. For a small, bare bones gimbal, this thing is fantastic. I mean, absolutely fantastic. It's so lightweight that I can just hold it out at an arm's length, which is what you're seeing now. It doesn't tire my arm out, my shoulders out, like a lot of other gimbals will. I use the RSC2, I use the RS2, I use the Weeble S, and all of those gimbals, you only get so long before your arm gets tired. This, you just get a lot longer because it's just that much easier to carry. All right, actually we might go see if we can catch some sunset shots because it looks like it might be pretty spectacular. I've fallen in love with this gimbal. It is so much fun to use, and I really stopped taking gimbals to places like this with me because they just were too big and bulky. Where this fits in my camera bag, when I break it down, it's super lightweight and easy to carry by hand like this. That's pretty much what I've done all day today. One thing that really stood out to me about this gimbal is even though it's really small and compact and obviously has very small arms, it actually does get really smooth footage, especially if you do the ninja walk. Now, with a gimbal this size and with something that's this big, you do need to walk as smooth as you possibly can to get the smoothest footage. But here, even just handheld walking through the snow, which means my footing is changing all of the time, so I'm not able to walk super smoothly, I was able to get really good looking smooth footage. So for example, this is active stabilization on the Sony ZV-1 handheld. Now this is just the gimbal, no stabilization in the camera. I've turned active stabilization off. Just the gimbal, handheld, pretty good. Which also means you gain that extra field of view, because now if I turn active stabilization on, it'll do the crop in to help get the stabilization working. So now this is the gimbal and active stabilization, which does work well, but it definitely crops in a bit and makes it a bit of a tighter shot. One of my favorite features about this gimbal is the little light that Zhiyun has built into it. It makes it so much easier to go and shoot in locations where you might need a little bit of extra light. You push and hold the little dial that's on the side and boom, all of a sudden you've got light. It dims in 10% increments, so you can dim it and put it bright. That's max brightness right there. And it also changes color temperatures from 2600 Kelvin to 5400 Kelvin. Which is great if you're trying to match different Kelvin, temperatures, if you're shooting inside with warmer light or outside with the sunlight. I don't think you need this light with the sunlight, but just depending on what you're shooting with, you can match. So that is fantastic, and the fact that it just comes with all of the different packages of the gimbal, it's not an upgrade, is really neat, which makes this even more valuable as a travel gimbal, because now you don't necessarily even need to remember to bring a little light with you. While I was out using this gimbal, even in very cold conditions of about 10, 11, 12 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about minus 12 degrees Celsius, the battery life really impressed me. I was able to get pretty much 6 hours, and that was while it was also charging my Sony ZV-E10, which is really saying something considering how cold it was. Now, Zhiyun says that you get up to a full 8 hours on a full charge. That will obviously depend on how you're using the gimbal, how heavy the load is, how well it's balanced, if you're using the light or not, if you're charging your camera or not. But the great thing is too that because they've included a power delivery port here on the side, you can recharge the gimbal from basically 0 all the way to full in under 2 hours using something with up to 25 watts of power delivery. That means you can run around with this thing all day and recharge it in between your shoots, or even just plug a power pack in while you're shooting and keep this thing charged so you can really run around with it all day. And while we'll talk about some of the shortcomings of this small compact design in just a little bit, one thing I was impressed was just how easy it was to use. Even in low situations, it just is super easy to move from a higher to a lower situation and be able to use the gimbal just like you would for anything else. It makes getting low shots like this one really easy and really fast and intuitive. You don't have to really think about trying to put the gimbal down into a low hanging position or anything like that. You just put it down, and then start running with it. One of my favorite features about this little gimbal is this OLED touchscreen. It's really responsive, it works really well, and it gives you access to pretty much all of the parameters that you need to be able to access to adjust the gimbal and get it set to your liking. I do wish there was a way to fine-tune some of the parameters a little bit more and give us a little more granular control over like the motor strengths and things like that. But otherwise, this touchscreen really makes being able to get around and adjust the gimbal and set it up the way you want it really fast, really intuitive, and very easy. And one more thing that I really do like about this gimbal is how well the little quick release plate system that Zhiyun has built works. So you put the gimbal away when you're ready to film again or do something with the camera, you know, handheld. Then you just come in, pop it in, and hook up my USB cable. You can take the camera off the gimbal, use your camera handheld or put it away in your bag, and then pop it right back on without having to rebalance the gimbal, assuming you don't change any of the arm lengths and settings and stuff like that. But it makes being able to take your camera off the gimbal, use it in another way, handheld, or put it away for a bit, and then put it back on the gimbal without having to rebalance, really fast and easy, and takes that whole step of having to rebalance your gimbal every time you reattach your camera completely out of the equation, which is really nice. One thing that this gimbal is limited to is the size of the camera you can put on it and effectively stabilize, and that's partly due to just because the fact it's a tiny gimbal, the arms are not that big. The motor strength, while it is really strong, you only have so much space that you can balance a camera. And so when I balance my A7S III on here, I had to use a really short, very lightweight lens to make it balance properly. And while it did work, it definitely was pushing the load limits of the gimbal. But for example, this combo here, which is most of the footage you've seen, is a Tamron 11-20. I can zoom it in or zoom it out because I balanced it about halfway. And the footage has looked really good overall throughout the system. But this is probably the largest camera and the longest focal length lens that I'd want to put on this. But if you're using something like an A6400 and A6600 with some of the smaller lightweight lenses that are available for it, including this one, you'd have no problem at all. Now if you use smaller cameras like the Sony ZV-1, you'd have absolutely no problem running around with this. One problem that I do have with the design of this gimbal, even though I really like the design overall, is the power button. It's really easy to accidentally turn it on or off because the power button isn't inset or recessed at all. If you put it in your bag with something near it, chances are it will turn the power on, and then your gimbal will be dead by the time you get wherever you're going, or at least will have run down the battery pretty significantly. That is something you need to watch when you're packing this up or traveling with it. If you get a certain package, you'll get a bag with it, but if you're just sticking it in or taking it out of your camera bag, like I generally tend to do, then you do need to be very careful of what you put around the gimbal so that it doesn't touch the power button and accidentally turn the gimbal on while you're traveling. The last weak point that I've come across, and again, I think this is something that Zhiyun can address via firmware, is I've had trouble with the roll axis staying level. Now, I've been pushing this thing way beyond what Zhiyun says you should push it through, and so I'm pretty sure it has a lot to do with the cold messing up the motors and their sensors to know where they are and their calibration. But I do think that's something that Zhiyun can adjust through firmware and maybe improve it and make it a little better down the road. There are, of course, links in the description if you want to check this gimbal out. I really have enjoyed and kind of fallen in love with working with this thing because it is so small and compact. It just makes running around with it a breeze, and the fact that it's held up against the extremely cold temperatures that we've had over the last couple weeks really is a testament to Zhiyun doing a great job with the design. Now, if you want to know about other larger gimbals, if you've got a larger camera setup, click or tap there. I put together a playlist of some of the other gimbals that I work with. As always, if you have questions, ask me in the comments below or join my live stream Wednesday nights at 4 p.m. Alaska time, 8 p.m. Eastern. I'll see you again soon in the next video. Cheers.